Every year, over £40 billion is stolen from the UK's public purse. But up and down Britain, there's an army of fraud fighters battling to win it back.
We managed to recover over £108,000.
We intercepted a potential fraud of £20 million.
You just can't go about stealing money and hope to get away with it.
From paying for the police and our health service, filling in potholes and emptying our dustbins, to making sure everyone has a roof over their head.
We all pay our taxes for that. To go into the hands of a criminal is a really despicable thing.
These local services we all depend on are under more pressure than ever.
The council had no money left.
I just felt sick to my stomach.
The investigators' mission has never been more vital.
We're like dogs with bones. We won't let it go.
We will find you, we will prosecute you, and we will take your assets off you.
The Fraud Squad are on the case. Today, a trusted local pharmacist betrays his community by changing their prescriptions to earn himself a staggering £76,000.
It's not a victimless crime. This money was intended to provide medicines to patients in the NHS. And more importantly, a large chunk of this money was intended for vulnerable adults who are suffering from Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
Investigators foil a gang of corrupt council workers who stole £1 million of housing benefit in a highly sophisticated inside job.
I'm appalled at this behaviour, personally. An attack on the housing benefit system is an attack on our society at large.
And the shocking case of a mum who steals her own daughter's disability payments to fund a life of luxury. The National Health Service sits right at the heart of our communities, with GP surgeries and chemists on our high streets providing a lifeline, particularly in recent years. Our local health services are funded by our taxes, and there's never been a more important time for every penny to go where it's needed most. So when a dishonest pharmacist steals the equivalent of 3 nurses' annual salaries to line his own pockets, the Fraud Squad spring into action. Over a period of 5 years, a supposedly respectable pharmacist in a busy South Wales chemist ruthlessly doctored 1,500 patient prescriptions, racking up the price of drugs by up to 100 times their value, then fraudulently submitting claims to the NHS, stealing more than £76,000 before the net closed in and his lies and deceit were laid bare.
This was not a small amount of money. This was money that was being taken away from patient care. And more importantly, a large chunk of this money was intended for vulnerable adults who are suffering from Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
In charge of cracking this disturbing case is counter-fraud investigator Mark Weston. And with nearly a quarter of a century of on-the-job experience under his belt, Mark has learnt to always expect the unexpected.
We investigate all sorts of fraud in the NHS. Prescription or pharmacy fraud is not that common, so we've not investigated many cases like this one before.
When a pharmacist who should be the very essence of respectability goes rogue, it hits a nerve.
The fact that drugs used to treat dementia have been targeted in this way makes the case a little bit more upsetting, really.
This callous abuse of trust and siphoning off of NHS cash intended for vulnerable patients first came to light back in 2017.
I received a call from the chief pharmacist at the health board. He said he was concerned about a pharmacist in the area that was claiming for expensive items that he wasn't actually dispensing to the patients. So I drove off to meet him to see what evidence he had firsthand.
The chief pharmacist responsible for ensuring pharmacies and staff in the area are managed in line with regulations had noticed a strange anomaly.
The expenditure on adult mental health drugs had increased over a 2-year period. He looked a bit closer and he noticed that the spend was down to 2 drugs in particular. Those 2 drugs were memantine and donepezil.
These vital medications are used to treat dementia and Alzheimer's and are a lifeline for many of the 850,000 people living with these debilitating conditions in the UK.
He examined the prescriptions in a bit more detail and noticed that some of them had been altered in handwritten form. He noticed that they'd crossed out the tablets and over the top of it he'd written liquids, expensive item.
Only a small proportion of patients require the expensive liquid form of the medication.
The difference in price between the liquids or medicines and tablets is huge. In some cases, the tablets are £3 or less than that, and the liquids are in fact almost £300. When he looked at the data in a little bit more detail, he could see that this claiming pattern was down to one pharmacy alone, and that was Talbot Green Pharmacy. This is the retail park where the pharmacy is located. It's a busy retail park in Talbot Green, near Llantrisant, where it's got all the usual retail outlets. This is the pharmacy just in front of us, which is situated next door to a GP surgery, and also just a few moments away is a large hospital, so it is a very busy pharmacy.
The chief pharmacist was now seriously concerned and dug a bit deeper.
He checked then with the adult mental health team, who contacted some of the patients' relatives to confirm whether they were in fact using tablets or liquids. And without exception, all of them confirmed that they were in fact having tablets.
On hearing this, Mark launches a formal fraud investigation. His first task is a forensic examination of the evidence.
The chief pharmacist provided us with a large bundle of prescriptions. Now, the problem with this particular script is, as you can see, it's been heavily overwritten there. You will see 4 times 50 ml, expensive item, memantine. Now, underneath the 4x50, you will see other writing. It may not be that clear, but on further inspection, it does actually say 3 times 28. And what that means, that this patient actually received 3 boxes containing 28 tablets. So he stood to gain from this fraudulent practice by quite a large sum, really.
Prescription after prescription reveals the same pattern.
Prescription for 3 months' supply. This occasion, you can see there's a Tipex entry on there, so we're not sure what's under that. You can see he's clearly written over that by 4 times 50 ml memantine oral solution, expensive item. As I'm going through all these entries, it's not difficult to see that alterations have been made, and it's quite shocking to see that they're so obvious, really.
But what's truly shocking about this heinous betrayal of trust is the sheer scale of the fraud.
We went through over 1,500 prescription forms, and in each case we identified that he had in fact given the tablets, which were far cheaper. The overall fraud at that stage was around about £25,000.
So obvious.
Yeah, it is. It's blatant, isn't it, really?
This is deception on an industrial scale, and it soon becomes clear that all 1,500 prescriptions are linked to one man, pharmacist Mr. Michael Lloyd.
We immediately liaised with the police in order to try and get a search warrant so we could secure the evidence at the pharmacy.
Later, fraudster Lloyd feels the heavy hand of the law.
Michael Lloyd seemed quite deflated, almost, really, defeated.
If we fall on hard times, one place we can turn to is our local council. Town halls up and down the country distribute billions in benefits to help residents in need. So it's a massive betrayal when a gang of supposedly trustworthy council workers decide they'd rather help themselves. For a decade, 7 public servants treated the communities they served with breathtaking contempt, knowingly processing fake housing benefit claims to help criminals steal over £1 million.
This was a shockingly sophisticated fraud against local government. A very serious case. People were trusted to be responsible for this vital housing benefit money, were in fact corrupting the systems and making sure that that money went to money launderers in the criminal underground.
Ben Reid works for the Crown Prosecution Service in their Specialist Fraud Division. When this scandalous case of housing benefit fraud lands on his desk, he gets straight to work, tracing the evidence back to 2015, when the first signs of the gang's dodgy dealings are discovered during routine checks by a colleague.
He was looking at this claim, and he was looking at the name on the claim and the national insurance number, and he checked that national insurance number on the government database. And on the government database, that particular number was registered to a different name.
To the untrained eye, it could be a simple mistake, but the claim assessor knows such a glaring error should never have cleared security.
Now, the claim assessor, he could see that this was obvious error on the claim, but yet this claim was somehow still flowing, still authorised, and still paying out into account. That just didn't feel right. That felt suspicious. It felt so suspicious that that claim assessor made a referral to the fraud team at the Department for Work and Pensions in Newcastle.
And it doesn't take long for even more alarming evidence to come to light.
The investigator obtained the bank statement from this one claim that had been referred on suspicion of fraud. Looking through the entries on that bank statement, he could see that there were many different housing benefit claims that were paying in, and those different claims were in different names, and that was not right. The usual way is a claim is made in one name, and that is paid into one account.
The £16 billion we spend each year on housing benefit is meant to go to individuals who need help with keeping a roof over their head. But someone appears to be using this safety net as a money-making scheme, inventing bogus claims to collect multiple payments.
We have a document here, which was a driving licence submitted in support of a claim in the name Khalil. If you look at it, it looks, to the untrained eye, like a legitimate document, but it's not. That's a false driving licence. Inquiries with the DVLA, the Driving Licence and Vehicle Authority, no record of this driving licence.
And this carefully crafted false identity is just the tip of the iceberg.
This is one claim of 80. 80 such claims were made.
That's 80 fictional characters, all invented purely to take taxpayers' cash away from where it's genuinely needed.
Each one of them's got to have the right details on. Each one of them's got to have this collection of supporting fraudulent documents. Each one of them's got to have a bank account that ultimately you can control and doesn't look suspicious on face value.
As the evidence mounts, it's revealed that not one, but 3 London authorities have fallen victim to this massive scam.
The first one was Barking and Dagenham, the second one was Kingston, and the third one was Lambeth Local Authority.
And this elaborate fraud has left a huge black hole in the public finances.
Now, housing benefit, of course, is payments for rent, and each one of those payments has to be substantial, so it was quite common to see payments into bank accounts every 2 weeks of around £600. You add that up, you very quickly have reached a £1 million figure. The total amount that had been extracted from the local authorities was £1,030,000.
This is a serious organised crime. But even worse, whoever is behind it has somehow bypassed all the normal security checks.
How are all these claims still functioning? How are they still paying out, despite all these obvious problems with the names and the national insurance numbers and the documents that have been provided?
There can only be one explanation.
The answer seemed to be there must be someone on the inside.
And evidence from council IT systems confirms everyone's worst fears. This is an inside job.
It became clear that these claims were going back to 7 particular claim assessors in 3 particular local authorities. They were the ones that were entering these claims onto the local authority systems. They were the ones who were authorising these claims and turning off the security features.
These council workers are the very people entrusted with protecting the public purse, not squeezing it dry.
They had intimate knowledge of how those databases ticked, of what the security checks were, what potential fraud assessors would be looking for, and how to defeat those checks. They were able to use their knowledge to make this fraud run smoothly and go undetected.
But to bring those responsible for this appalling abuse of trust to justice, the investigation must step up a gear.
Just linking claim assessors to particular claims was not enough. I needed hard evidence.
Later, the case balloons as the claim assessors' mobile phones reveal a far-reaching web into the criminal underworld.
Over 70 devices were seized, and on them were found over 5,000 messages between claims assessors and the money launderers.
Our hard-working investigators are committed to stamping out fraud. But what does protecting the public purse mean to them?
Each year, the council tax bill comes through to local residents. They have to find the money for that council tax from their pocket. They go out to work for that money and they have to hand it over, trusting that councils will provide a service.
The public purse is such a valuable, finite resource. It's not bottomless.
People that commit fraud against the public purse, they're selfish and greedy, and essentially they have a sense of entitlement, placing themselves above other people. And I find that very offensive.
It's public money that's intended for public good. It's money that we pay towards vital services within our communities.
Protecting the public purse is important because that money is there for the safety and the protection of our society.
You should know what is happening to that money, and councils are responsible for spending that money wisely.
My grandfather said to me, look after the pennies because the pounds look after themselves. That's your answer. You've got to stop fraud right from the beginning.
In Wales, the net is closing in on corrupt pharmacist gone rogue, Michael Lloyd. He's been betraying the trust of vulnerable patients by doctoring prescriptions in order to steal tens of thousands of pounds from the NHS. Exploiting his position of trust and claiming for expensive drugs while actually dispensing far cheaper alternatives.
Part of being a qualified and professional pharmacist is having honesty and integrity and being trusted by the community in which you serve.
But this fraudster's deceit makes a mockery of his profession as he siphons off funds by forging the prescriptions of elderly dementia sufferers. Leading the case is crack fraud investigator Mark Weston, who's obtained a warrant to search Michael Lloyd's pharmacy.
On the 11th of January 2018, we arrived here at the premises where we conducted a search of the pharmacy with the police. We seized bundles of prescriptions and also took a forensic copy of the pharmacist's computer, which would enable us to marry up the actual dispensing records with the prescriptions. At the time of the search, Michael Lloyd was on his way home. So by the time he'd got home, the police were at the property and he was requested to go back to the pharmacy then to assist us identifying items.
Lloyd's 5-year run of thieving from the NHS is over, and he knows it.
I can remember his demeanour now. He was deflated almost, really. Defeated.
While the computer data is analysed by forensic experts, attention turns to the vulnerable elderly patients unwittingly caught up in this scam.
We had to act quickly to secure any evidence that may still be with the patients in the form of the packaging and the actual tablets that we suspected that they were actually receiving. We were dealing with quite vulnerable patients, elderly and infirm, so it was essential that we didn't worry them unnecessarily. We did this in a sensitive way, and once we reassured them of the situation, they were very helpful and were able to give us statements confirming that they'd actually received tablets and not the liquids that had been claimed for. This is vital evidence. Having the physical box of tablets proved beyond doubt that the tablets were being provided, yet the expensive liquids were being claimed for.
Mark is convinced this new material gives him the upper hand.
I thought it's going to be difficult for him to get out of this one, really.
He brings Lloyd in for questioning, but the fraudster's got his own game plan.
During the interview, Michael Lloyd replied no comment to all questions we put, and he seemed very nervous throughout the interview.
It's turning into a classic game of cat and mouse between investigator and fraudster. Then comes the breakthrough Mark needs. Analysis of the computer seized in the search of the pharmacy reveals this fraud is far bigger than Mark had thought, going way beyond the confines of just the dementia medication.
The result of that analysis identified another £50,000 worth of fraud, which proved he was also targeting day-to-day drugs as well, just to maximise his profits, really.
The total amount stolen is now a shocking £76,000. That's equivalent to the cost of 2,500 GP appointments.
After we'd gone through all the prescriptions and all the entries on the computer systems, we decided to interview Michael Lloyd under caution for a second time, just to put the totality of what we had found to him again. On this occasion, he provided a pre-prepared statement making admissions to the frauds that he had carried out.
With the cat out of the bag, it's game over for this disgraced pharmacist.
There was three key vital parts of evidence in this case, really. Firstly was the altered handwritten notes by Michael Lloyd on all the falsified prescriptions. Then there was the physical boxes we obtained from the patients who assisted us with this inquiry, and also the confirmation by analyses in computer system that he had actually provided the tablets and not the liquids as he had claimed for.
Armed with damning evidence and a confession, Mark expects and hopes justice will be done.
It's not a victimless crime. This money was intended to provide medicines to patients in the NHS. And more importantly, a large chunk of this money was intended for vulnerable adults who were suffering from Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
After a near 2-year investigation, Michael Lloyd finds himself in court, where he pleads guilty to fraud by false representation.
Michael Lloyd provided a full admission to his actions in a pre-prepared statement.
Following his guilty plea, the judge hands Lloyd a 16-month jail sentence for his wrongdoing, a result that is welcomed by Mark and his team.
At the end of the day, the NHS is there to serve all of us and not really there to line the pockets of a greedy pharmacist.
As a direct result of his callous greed, Lloyd has been struck off the pharmacy register for good. Meanwhile, Mark and his team can reflect on a job well done, as they've since recovered the stolen £76,000. We cough up nearly £32 billion a year through our council tax, a big slice of which goes on the nation's social care bill. This vital public money is intended to improve the quality of life of the most vulnerable in our society, not fund a life of luxury for their carers. The mother of a disabled daughter spots an opportunity. She splashes 60 grand of taxpayers' cash on fancy holidays and mobile phones. That's enough to pay the annual salary of 3 carers.
There was trips to Karachi, there was trips to Euro Disney, there was all sorts of stuff, none of it related to the daughter's care package that we could find.
Overseeing this concerning case is counter-fraud investigator for Reading Borough Council, Les Nicholson.
I have a saying, the needy, not the greedy.
With a career spanning 35 years, Les can spot a scam at 60 paces.
I enjoy it because it's different. I mean, it's not what people expect local authorities to get involved with. We're here to protect the public purse.
So, when a colleague in accounts rings Les to raise doubts about a suspect social care claim, he's instantly on alert.
I had a call from somebody related to social care direct payments who said they were a little concerned that they'd just undertaken an audit and there was some discrepancies on the bank statement and some of the invoices didn't look quite as they should, and would we be interested in having a look at it for them?
If you need social care, your local council will either arrange it for you or give you the cash to sort it yourself. The mother of a disabled daughter is being paid a generous weekly sum to organise care on her child's behalf.
The daughter was deemed to have a high care need and needed one-on-one care 24/7. So the care package in this instance was quite considerable. The mother was receiving over £630 a week direct payment in respect of her daughter's care needs.
That's over £32,000 a year of public money, all meant to give this youngster a better life. To back up her claim to these huge sums of cash, the mother has been submitting what initially looks like all the right paperwork. But when Les puts it under the microscope, it starts to look decidedly dodgy.
I was going through the accounts, the bank statements that were sent over from the financial assessment team, and it was quite obvious there was something not quite right. What first stuck in my mind was the figures on the bank statements. There was payments of zero amount, which I've never seen on a bank statement before. There were glaring errors on the bank statement, so it set alarm bells ringing that these statements may or could have been doctored.
It looks like someone's been fiddling the figures. And with such large sums involved, this could be a case of serious fraud. To find out what's going on, Les must first follow the paper trail. The mother has provided invoices which appear to prove she's using the money to pay her daughter's carers. But are they genuine?
My initial thing was to contact the providers whose names were on the invoices and ask the head of the finance section to verify that they were their invoices and B, the work was done and had been carried out and paid for by the mother.
One Shot Care provider told the council fraud team that they'd not seen the disabled girl in over 2 years. Yet for some reason, this mother had submitted a recent invoice from them.
We'd never come across a case that I was aware of in Reading Borough Council where somebody deliberately looks to have set out to defraud the council by altering statements and invoices.
The other care providers quickly confirm that most of the invoices are fake.
We deemed there were 75 invoices which were false invoices in one way, shape or form. In my opinion, it was a deliberate, dishonest attempt to appropriate money from the direct payments account.
This is no one-off mistake. Such a huge volume of fake invoices suggests a long-running campaign to pull the wool over the council's eyes. And to make matters even worse, the prime suspect is the one person you'd expect to act in their child's best interests: her own mother.
I refer the matter straight across to the safeguarding team of social services, because my thoughts were, if the money isn't being spent on the daughter's care as intended, where is it going, and is the daughter suffering her care provisions as a result of the shortfall of funding?
Concerned about the girl's welfare, social services quickly pay her a visit.
They made contact and they told me there was no immediate concerns. The daughter, in their opinion, hadn't suffered unduly from the shortage of cash.
Relieved that the young girl is as well as can be, Les's attention returns to the large sums of cash that are still unaccounted for.
It started alarm bells ringing. Is the cash needed, and where's the cash going? I decided the matter was probably one that we needed police assistance.
The paper trail has taken Les as far as it can. Accompanied by the police and social workers, he heads to the mother's home.
We knocked at the door, there was no answer. I spoke to a neighbour who confirmed that there was 2 vehicles on the front, so they would be surprised if there was nobody in the property, because they don't normally leave without taking a disabled child in a car. So we decided to sit and wait for 10-15 minutes. We saw the mother coming up the street and identified her to the police as the main suspect. They went across and they arrested her on the spot. I was working with the police to effect the search.
Inside the property, shocking new evidence exposes this mum's scam to be bigger than the fraud officers had imagined.
What we found in the house were mainly applications for credit card accounts set up in the disabled daughter's names. I think items had been bought on credit cards allegedly held by the daughter, who had no capacity to hold a credit card. Items had been paid for and then paid off by money that was being taken from the direct payment account. It wasn't as simple take money out of the account and put it into another bank account. This had been moved around between 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 accounts. It was quite sophisticated manipulation of the monies once it left the direct payment account.
This calculating mother has some serious questions to answer.
We interviewed her for about 2 hours, and understandably she went no comment to every question. She didn't come across as anybody that was panicking, but it did also give me the impression that she was sort of like playing the game that this is such a complicated fraud that you're never going to unravel it anyway, and you'll never prove it was me.
The tight-lipped suspect is released on bail, but the evidence seized at her house speaks for itself. Shockingly, tens of thousands of pounds of public money that was supposed to pay for her daughter's healthcare needs has instead been used by the mother to treat herself to a luxury lifestyle.
A lot of mobile phone bills had been paid, a lot of credit card bills had been paid, furniture had been bought. There was trips to Karachi, there was trips to Euro Disney, all sorts of stuff. None of it related to the daughter's care package that we could find.
This swindling mum has used Reading Council as her own private bank account.
Just over 98,000 paid into the account, of which 60,000 was unaccounted for and had been misappropriated by the mother.
And Les's continued investigation unearthed that this woman has been milking her council for all it's worth for 3 long years.
So it looks like they were testing the system from as early as 2013. Found a mechanism how the system could be bypassed quite easily. Tested it a few times over the preceding years, and in 2015, 2016 went for it big time.
With the evidence piled against her, this mum is summoned to court.
And it was here in the December of 18 that all the hard work by the team, the financial investigator and Thames Valley Police came to a head, that our suspect was charged with a number of Fraud Act offences, a number of Theft Act offences and money laundering offences.
At the court hearing, this wrongdoer still manages to surprise Les and his team by pleading not guilty.
She wouldn't accept any liability or responsibility. She denied being involved in it.
In January 2019, following a 12-day trial, the mother was found guilty and given a 2-year suspended prison sentence.
The sentencing was quite lenient as far as we were concerned. I mean, we did have to take into account, obviously, the ramifications had a more penal sentence being imposed. And so, in hindsight, I think we accepted the sentencing that was issued until we moved on to our next case.
Crown Prosecutor Ben Reid is building a case against 7 crooked council workers who have callously betrayed the residents of the 3 London boroughs they were meant to serve.
They were the ones that were entering these claims onto the local authority systems. They were the ones who were authorising these claims and turning off the security features.
By knowingly processing fraudulent housing benefit claims, they've depleted the council's coffers by a staggering £1,026,000. There's now enough evidence to arrest them and search their homes.
Most of them denied that they had any involvement in the fraud. Most of them have said that they'd simply been handed documents by their managers which they'd processed without any knowledge of dishonesty. However, when their homes were searched, it very quickly became obvious that their homes were full of documents that had been used in the claims, and their interviews simply could not be true.
Their mobile phones and laptops are taken for forensic examination.
One of the really important stages of this investigation was the analysis of the digital devices that were seized from the claims assessors in this case.
Thousands of incriminating text messages reveal that the corrupt council workers are not the only ones up to their necks in the fraud. Pulling the strings behind the scenes are a pair of criminals who are running a massive money laundering operation using the cash from the fake housing benefit claims.
Over 70 devices were seized, and on them were found over 5,000 messages between claims assessors and the money launderers.
The messages reveal that the dishonest officials have been recruited by a dastardly duo who are paying them to funnel public funds through a web of dodgy bank accounts.
Those messages showed how this fraud was being organised. They showed the claim assessors working with each other to organise false claims. They showed the claim assessors working with the money launderers to get those false claims into local authorities.
But devastatingly, the masterminds behind this widespread scam have skipped the country before they could be arrested. £650,000 of cash they pocketed has vanished. But while they may have escaped prosecution for now, the trail of evidence they've left behind gives Ben everything he needs to nail another key suspect. Council worker Menelik Cowan. He's the bad egg on the inside, who's been corrupting his council colleagues across the capital.
We found Menelik Cowan talking to another claim assessor, and he's organising for people to go to the local authority, to meet with her and to submit one of these false claims, and for her to rubber stamp those documents and put them through into pay into these money laundering bank accounts.
Cowan has recruited colleagues so that more and more fake claims can be processed, meaning more and more public funds can be siphoned off to the money launderers.
So, reading from his text message then, he's saying, give them my number and tell them to text me when they get to the office. Very clear instructions there on what to do. These messages link directly to a claim that was put into pay at the local authority. And later on in the messages, you can see the claim assessor asking Menelik Cowan, what happens next? I've done this now. Menelik Cowan responds, well, now you get paid every 2 weeks. So it's very clear from this message evidence, this is financial motivation.
These trusted council workers are being paid by the ringleaders to set up claim after claim. and Cowan's happy to boast about the profits.
He says, I'm getting £500 a week from the money launderers for my involvement in this fraud. £500 a week, that's a yearly income of £26,000. But these messages really added in the fine detail about who was playing what role, and I thought we're going to be able to fine-tune our case to get the right result for each one of these claim assessors.
But despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Cowan's lips remain sealed.
Difficult to talk in detail about Cowan because when we interviewed him, he went no comment for most of his interview. But his actions speak loudly about the kind of man that he was in this case. He's quite prepared to corrupt his role as a claim assessor in the local authority and corrupt it for greed and not caring at all about the important role that housing benefit plays in our society. Cowan's not a very nice man.
But Ben now has the evidence he needs to hold the council workers who facilitated this astonishing fraud to account.
We charged this case to the most straightforward of charges we could. So at court, we presented it electronically by form of tablets and on big screens in front of the jury.
And thanks to the Crown Prosecution Service and the fraud investigation, the 7 crooked council officials are all found guilty.
I'm glad to say that all of the claim assessors were convicted by the jury, and in March of 2019, 5 of the 7 received immediate prison sentences. Menelik Cowan received 6.5 years in prison.
Between them, they're sentenced to a total of 17 years behind bars.
I'm appalled at this behaviour, personally. An attack on the housing benefit system is an attack on our society at large. It's an attack on those people who can't afford to put a roof over their heads. And I hate to think that there might be someone out there who didn't get somewhere to live because of the behaviour of this criminal gang. I find that truly horrible.
The CPS is now focusing on getting as much of the stolen money as possible back where it belongs, in the public purse, ready to help those who really need it.
It's very important that gangs like this are brought to justice. If they're not brought to justice, then this money doesn't help those people who need it, and instead it just feeds the greedy criminals on the underground.
Join us again when the Fraud Squad continue their fight.
This is a premeditated, callous pattern of behaviour.
Bringing wrongdoers to justice and defending the public purse.
A very successful investigation, and one which completely dismantled this organised crime group.